Hey everybody, it is your Sam and I'm here yet again with another video. And what I want to do today is I want to read to you chapter 1 of I'm No Hero. It's making me really nervous to do this, but if you can, I want you to give me your honest feedback. See if you like it. If you don't, that's fine too. Any feedback is good feedback because, yeah, it's y'all's opinions and that will help me out as an author. So without further ado, here is chapter 1 of I'm No Hero. "How many did you get?" he called out to me from his perch on the wall. The old stone wall from some forgotten purpose stretched the length of field and into half of the woods until it met a stream. Its white stones, overgrown with weeds and moss, crumbled in places, while standing strong in others. Johnny sat on the end of it, at the path that would lead us home, or into Alamount. 3. I held up my trap catches. The forest behind me was a second home, but today something had been off. The birds were quiet, none winging between the branches and definitely not calling out to one another. The trees stood silent, not a bit of a breeze ruffling their leaves. "That's good," he grinned, taking me from my thoughts as he drew up his string of 2 rabbits. Same trap. I tried to smile. I wanted to go home, to shake off the oddness of the forest. Johnny picked up his spear and stood. He had been trying to practice with it before our yearly hunting trip in a few weeks. Unlike me, he didn't have to hunt nearly every day to keep his family fed. Town or home? I noticed a group of village children heading up from the riverbank. Something pricked the hairs on the back of my neck. What are they doing out here? "See the older ones?" Johnny pointed with his spear. He placed his free hand on my belt and pulled me close to his side. They were teaching the little ones to fish. I finally saw the handfuls of fishing rods 2 of the older children had in their hands. Johnny pressed into my back, all broad and hard. His free arm wrapped around me as we watched the kids pause by a large tree. I scanned the area, the prickling sensation getting worse. Bumps rose on my arms. "How many?" "What?" "I want 4, at least." His breath, a hot feather on my neck seconds before he nuzzled there. 4 what? I gritted my teeth, wondering what this dread curling in my stomach and making my fingers itch for my daggers meant. Couldn't he feel it? Kids. His hand squeezed my hip hard. Oh. I stepped away. The trees were making noise, creaking and swaying, but there wasn't that much wind. Maybe old lady Marcus's oxen had gotten loose again. I glanced at the sun. They would be coming from the opposite direction of our fields, though. Gee. His voice grated on my ears like a knife tip dragging along a rock. The noise in the forest grew louder. The trees moved wilder. Was that a snort? I dropped my catch on the wall. "Johnny," I started to warn just as something huge burst from the tree line in a spew of dirt, torn branches and leaves. The kids screamed. The giant white pig turned its fat head towards the screams. The tusks covered in roots and dirt were as long as my forearms. They spouted on each side of a wide, wrinkled snout. My feet pounded the path toward the kids before I knew what I was doing. Those tree trunks of pig legs started moving too. I felt Johnny's fingers graze my arm, then the thundering of those hooves shook the earth underneath my footfalls. "Run!" I screamed, waving my arms high in the air as I did. My shoulder pinged with aches as I waved my arms higher, part to distract the boar and part to try to get the kids to snap out of their screaming and huddling together. I yelled again, my lungs burning with the effort of running and screaming at the same time. A few moved, running and scrambling toward town, away from the pig's trajectory. Fishing rods forgotten, their friends forgotten too. There were 3 that stood, their mouths as wide as their eyes, rooted to the spot by the old tree. "Run! Move!" I screamed at them again. Panic ran up and clawed at my throat. I tugged at a dagger, fumbling the finger holds until I managed to fit it into my hand. I tugged another one free into my other hand. I let one fly, missing the pig's snout by a hair. Blood trickled down the white cheek. The other thunk deep into the tree by the oldest boy's head. That pig kept barreling toward the children by them. I tugged out another dagger and let it fly. This one hit its mark. It sank deep into a dark, white-rimmed eye. The pig gave a shrill squeal as it skidded to a stop on 4 stiff legs. Dust and dirt flew up in front and around it as it tossed its head. Both daggers stayed in it. I must have gotten into some muscles with those throws. The one in the eye hadn't done what I had hoped it would, though. Any other animal in that dagger would have gone into the brain. I had just made it angry. My dagger, or the dust, made the boy wake up. He shoved the younger kids up into the large tree. The tree's trunk, as thick as the pig was wide, leaned over the riverbank. It wouldn't hold if that pig decided to ram it, no matter how thick the coils of roots were skimming through the grass before plunging deep into the earth. It pawed the ground with another squeal, this one deeper, thunderous, and less scream of pain. Another pair of daggers found my hands, and I threw them deep into the wide, low-slung belly of the pig. It screamed that high-pitched scream again, that large head turning to aim at me. Gods! I skidded for a pivot, threw down my hand as I slid to grapple with the road sand to help the change in my trajectory to the riverbank. If I could jump it, I could get in the water and I could get away. Thundering sounded behind me. The earth beneath my feet shook again. I felt it right behind me. The earth shook with each cloven hoof driving that mountain of flesh and tusks after me. At least my family would have enough pig meat to last a year or two. "Nadasha!" Johnny yelled to my left. I dared a glance, his spear held high. I shifted toward him, trying to get the boar to do the same so Johnny could have a decent shot. I still headed to the riverbank, but it would take me longer. That pig could move. I realized something else as I focused on where I was going. I had shifted to where I would hit the short rapids. I would either be killed by the boar, or I would break myself on those rocks that refused to bend to the river's will. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him take the running stance. I watched that familiar fluid motion in a blur as that spear began its flight. The pig had gotten too close. That spear would land right behind me. I readied the jump in the next couple of steps. My foot slipped in the soft sand of the pushed-up bank. Instead of leaping, I slid and half lobbed myself down the bank. Sand shifted up over my boots as I tried for purchase. I pushed at the bank behind me with my hands, trying to push further away and down. I had to keep moving away from the beast. Sand and dirt and clumps of grass showered down on my head as I slowed down when I reached the mud and rocks beside the flowing waters of the Gala. I whirled, looking to see the pig skidding down the bank, Johnny's spear sticking up out of its neck, blood and foam flung out of its mouth as it struggled to get back up, to stop from sliding. A small squeal sounded this time as it flung its front legs out and dug its hooves into the sand. The sand moved up and over us in a cloud as its lungs emptied in a large swoosh. I felt splatter on my face. I felt that last breath warm me as we stared at each other. What could have been my death was the pig's last effort. The world wanted to turn topsy on me. "Nadasha? Chi?" Johnny half slid, half jumped down the bank to me. He grabbed me in his strong arms. "You hurt?" He swiped at the wet dribbling down my face. "Is this yours?" His hand, covered in red and white foam from my face. I shook my head. He puffed a breath. "Good." I paused for a breath before he grabbed my shoulders and shook me. "You stupid girl, what were you thinking? Of all the—" "Hello?" a boy's voice called from behind the pig. "We're all right. Get help." Johnny interrupted his own tirade. "They're already coming." The boy's head popped up over the edge of the bank, as far away from the pig as he could be and still within earshot. With Johnny's help, I pulled myself up out of the bankside, the gurgling of the Gala soft against the roar in my ears. Johnny took a rag out of his small pack and began drying off my back and butt. Each swipe near my shoulder drew a whimper up my throat until I bit down on them. I pulled away. "Stop. It's fine." I reached for my dagger. Johnny beat me to it. He pulled it from the eye with a squelch and a liquid pop and handed me the little hilt. Blood had spattered on his arm and shoulder from the pull. A leg thrashed, knocking me in the shoulder, and I fell back into the rocks at the river's edge. My other shoulder plowed into the water, hitting a rock. I heard the crack before I felt it. I had just gotten that shoulder to working properly from the fall I took last week, too. Johnny was on top of me, pulling me up before I got a mouthful of muddy water. I coughed, groaned, and coughed again. Must have got a nerve or part of its mind. I glared at the dagger in my hand, then at the boar. The white boar. We wouldn't have to go on that hunting trip to find it anymore. Johnny half carried me back to the bank. I crawled up it, taking out my daggers from the cheek, and then the two from the stomach of the boar as I went. I cleaned them off in the grass as best as I could before sheathing them. I sat on my knees, watching the dust cloud rise from the eastern gate and come down the road towards us. The cold water of the gala sunk into my clothes. They stuck to my back and sides, leaching what warmth my body had soaked up during the morning out. My teeth began chattering as my heartbeat quietened in my ears and eased its thunder in my chest. I pulled myself up to standing, then considered it a bad idea when I stumbled drunkenly towards the kids who were climbing down out of the tree. I leaned against the trunk once I made it there. I looked at each of their upturned faces. Their eyes were so wide I thought they might pop out of their little heads. Are any of you hurt? One little girl showed me her hands, scuffed from the tree bark. I went back to my knees. It was safer being closer to the ground when it kept moving on me. The contents of my stomach, which started turning with each throb of pain in my shoulder, wouldn't have that far to go either. I gently brushed her hands clean. Just a little cut here and there, little one. You'll be all right. She nodded, tears welling up in her little eyes. Gods, would she ever want to go fishing again? Horses skidded to a stop beside us, spraying dirt with their hooves. I looked up at the shining armor of the two guards. Gee? Eddie dismounted, rushing over to me. Ia, right behind him, asked, What happened? The kids were saying something about a pig monster? Ia's voice had always amused me. As one of the biggest women I knew, stronger than a few of the oxen in town even, her voice was like a songbird. Eddie scoured my face, wiping away stuff around the wet spots I felt drying. His thick leather gloves were rough. Once he grew satisfied none of it was mine, he stopped, his hands falling back to his sides. He must have seen me shiver, because the next moment he had the blanket off his saddle and around me. Pig monster, white boar, the white boar. A chill washed down my spine. I pointed to the bank. He had killed it. We all knew he would kill it. Johnny's with it. Ia patted my shoulder with one hand. I tried not to scream, and shoved Eddie towards his horse with the other. Get her some water before the whole village arrives. Eddie quickly obeyed, giving me his canteen. Drink slow. You went pale there for a second. He motioned to my face. Since that's not yours, are you hurt anywhere? I shook my head as I swished around a mouthful of water. I swallowed and took another gulp before answering. Just my shoulder again. Again? Gods above, it's the white boar. Ia had found her voice. Eddie started over, then hung back, casting a furtive glance at me. Go. I waved the canteen at him. Another mistake as the bones creaked and cracked in my shoulder. Eddie reached Ia's side when the first of the villagers arrived. Doc pulled up in his cart, one of the merchants and a fisherman in the wagon behind him. Doc hopped out as I gave the canteen to one of the kids to take a sip or two and pass it among them. The mayor and his polished chaise came next, with a magistrate beside him. He had a woman with him. The girl beamed and sniffled at the same time as she spotted the woman. She started toward her, but Doc knelt in front of her. You hurt? The girl shook her head, hiding her hands behind her back. Just scratches from the bark, I told him as he started reaching for her hands. He nodded. Go on then. He checked the other two kids over, talking with them gently and not letting them leave his side until he personally saw their parents arrive. The large man moved over to me, going down on one knee with a grunt. You look like a mess, lass. You should see the pig. Doc grunted, looking down at my legs and running his hands along them, but I caught the half smile anyway. It's white, ain't it? I nodded, finding my mouth working dry again, but the children had put the canteen back on Eddie's saddle when they left. I cringed when he touched my shoulders and he grunted. Got both of 'em this time. I ain't going to tell you to rest and expect it to happen, but I'm going to tell you and hope it happens. You need rest. A good whole day of doing nothing but eating, sleeping, and talking with your family. You're not going to have much time with 'em soon enough. I'll try. It's just the one. Hurts worse this time. He leaned over me. I'm going to have to set it again. I grabbed a stick from the grass beside me. I bit down and worked to keep my breathing even. Doc counted under his breath, but he pushed it in place at the wrong count. I should be used to that by now. Pain shot through my arm all the way to my fingers and mind and tingled there. I moved my fingers, making sure everything was at least set right, even if the pain worsened more momentarily. He rubbed the area, easing the muscles and their attachments as best as he could with his thick fingers. I'll make sure Rossi gets the majority of the pork, but I'll have them to cut a ham off of it for the celebration that's sure to come. I nodded, knowing that would happen. Ever since Johnny had grown into his large hands and feet, everyone knew he had to be the one. No hero in our past had ever been scrawny, according to the statues and paintings. Most had been pretty, like Johnny. Scene skip. They were still butchering the boar at sunset. I nodded off against a tree every now and then. The vial Doc had given me for the pain worked its magic and made me drowsy too. Johnny had nudged me often enough that I got tired of it and told him to either move or he was going to lose his hands. He sauntered off with the crowd to help with butchering the boar and making sure every part of it was cleaned and taken to the people that could pack it for the party tomorrow or to keep. The skin had already been carted off to the tannery, the brains to the smokehouse owner. I could never remember his name. And all the other various parts and portions were taken care of by Doc himself. I was having a nice dream about voices buzzing like white bees nearby when something started shaking me. I gasped in a lungful of air and struck out with a hand. Doc's thick chest stopped my hand, cracking my fingers and making my wrist hurt. Sorry, I yawned, patting his chest where I'd hit him. Eddie, Doc called. Take her home. He hauled me up to my feet, gentle as he could with my shoulders being banged up as they were. I can go on my own. I folded the blanket. No, I tried to fold the blanket. I couldn't lift the thing off the ground. I dropped it with a gasp as Doc just picked me up by the waist and hips, placing me on Eddie's saddle with another of his grunts. I glared down at him as he said, You're too light, lass. Gotta put some meat on you. Eddie mounted behind me, his armor cool against the thin fabric of my mud-caked shirt and hunting gear. He chuckled, his breath warm against my cheek. A bit bony, but she still got some curves. Doc's look soured as it went from me to Eddie. Any funny business, Eddie of Tamamine, and I will make you sing like a bird for life. Understand? Aye. His swallow was nearly as loud as his answer. We were well down the road before Eddie took a big enough breath for his arms to loosen at my sides. Doc's scary, ain't he? I giggled. Only to those with bad intentions. Aw, come on, G. You know me. I wouldn't do nothing. He paused. Unless a girl were willing, and we were in love, and, well, you know. I leaned my head back on his shoulder. The moons above, although not full, were bright enough to see the road well. I could tell it wasn't just the shadows darkening his complexion. Thinking about Selah. Eddie shrugged, making my head bounce. I sighed. I don't know if she's coming back, Eddie. I know. His voice was soft. Mama always told me that first loves are hardly the lasting, lifetime ones. We rode in silence for a moment. I was about to fall back asleep when he spoke up again. That don't mean you and Johnny won't last, though. Even when he goes off to be the hero, he'll take you along with him. We always said he would. He said he would. Said he can't take down the big ones without you. I snorted. If he can take the big ones down at all. Eddie chuckled. You both did a number on that boar, but Johnny did give it the killing blow. Oh? Yeah. Right in the eye. Is that what he said? Didn't have to. Part of that eyeball was still on him. My insides and face heated. That had been my dagger in that eye, not his. He didn't even have daggers. I took a deep breath. The boar had still moved after that dagger, though. Johnny had downed it with a spear. That was that. Johnny was the new hero of the new prophecy. He would have to choose his team and go to the capital. There he would be given quests that would save people. He would be popular, and he would forget about me. I would have gladly been your first. The thought, the memory ached. Looks like you got company. Eddie's voice drew me from my wildly careening thoughts. Leaning against the gate just outside the pool of lantern light hanging from my tree, as if my thoughts had summoned him, stood Tasp. He opened the gate for us, but Eddie stopped just outside. You won't come in? At least water your horse and get some for yourself before heading back. I pulled my leg over the horse's neck. Tasp's hands came to my waist and half let me slide down, half lifted me toward him. We'll be fine, Eddie said as he patted his horse's neck. Sides, you got a story to tell, Tasp. Eddie nodded at him. Eddie? Tasp nodded back. Should I lock her up or something? His hair hid his face from me, but I could hear that smirk in his voice. Eddie chuckled. Good luck trying that, and let me know how it goes if you live. He turned his horse and gave a wave over his shoulder before nudging the beast into a fast canter. I slipped from Tasp's hands. Leaning on the gate to shut it, I turned, my shoulder brushing his chest. Then I was captive. His hands kept my face and tilted it to the lantern light. The light burned my eyes. I felt tears form at the corners. How did you get all this on you? His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet it took on before he got to the good part of the story he was telling. I swallowed, my mouth still dry as I peered into his hooded gaze. That phrase I remembered earlier came prancing back through my mind. Something in my hand pulsed hard, like my heart was there instead of in my chest. We killed the white boar. We? Johnny... His broad, cool hands fled from my face and he took 2 steps back. I see. What? Why? I lifted a hand, the pain shooting up my shoulder. I let it back down and tried the other one, reaching for him. It didn't hurt as badly. I suppose he'll choose you to be part of his hero band to fulfill what the quests have unleashed. We've been hearing some rumors of odd things. I watched him run a hand through his hair. It was all puffed, like a beast bristling. Maybe. I stepped toward him, toward the path home. We've talked about it since we were kids. I could almost reach him. Yeah, I know. Another grand adventure for the 2 of you. Was he growling? Task turned and walked down the path. I would have to run to catch up to him. My muscles screamed in protest as I jogged after him. I tripped over something, caught myself, and decided it wasn't worth another fall to catch up to him. Tasp? You're hurt. Had he left my side at all? Had I dreamed of him walking away from me just then? I could feel the coolness of his skin as his hands came to rest on my waist. So light, like feathers resting there instead of fingertips and palms. The way he had said it was like he knew better than I did what I felt. Just some sore muscles. I looked at him. What's wrong? You're hurt, he stated again. I waited for him to bite the air. Something was in those words, in that tone, but I couldn't put my finger on it. He loomed over me, the darkness cloaking him as a cloud scudded over the one moon and then the other. His eyes flashed once the cloud was gone, as did his teeth. Will you go with him? I wanted to take a step back. I could feel every muscle aching to do just that. I needed to make myself smaller, not a threat like I had been taught all my life to do against a bear or a big carnivorous beast. At the same time, a flame flickered to life, daring me to go on my toes and square up with him. I wasn't scared of Tasp. I felt my spine straighten. I tilted my head back and met that burning gaze with my own. I doubted mine was as tense as his, but I tried to put that burning thing inside me all in my face so he could see it. My eyes burned. Of course, I wanted to cry now. Yes, I'll go with him. He needs me. He can't do all that alone. I pressed my hands up into that larger-than-life chest, feeling both sets of lungs working under my palms. I will go. You don't have to pretend to care about the poor little girl across the river anymore. I will leave this time so you can do what you want. You don't have to run away to your uncle's to get away from me. His hands covered mine, so cold. He didn't back down. You really think that's what I want? He hissed. I had to take the battle away from you, from my village, from Alamount to keep you and the others I care about safe. I went to my uncle's to figure out what I needed to do. You couldn't do that here? I couldn't help you? No, you are part of the problem. Then I would have been the best to help you out. I tried yanking my hands free, but my shoulders trembled and screamed, lightning pain from the effort. So much for the medicine. You only make things worse, Tasp groaned. Each word he uttered made him diminish from the growling, the fiery thing he had been a moment before to the boy I knew was deep inside, the one that always second-guessed himself. There they were, trailing down my cheeks now. Those words he threw at me filled me and made me spill over. I slid my hands from his grasp. Then you will be rid of me at last. I sidestepped around him. My legs felt like they had rocks tied to them. The path to the house blurred before me, but I knew it by heart. I was just going to crawl into bed and hopefully never rise out of it again. Alright, so that is chapter 1 of I'm No Hero. Let me know in the comments below what you think about it, and if you have any questions or anything, feel free to put them there too. Hopefully I will have another snippet ready for you next month, and we will go from there. As always, be kind to one another, stay safe, keep being creative, and keep writing, and I will see you next time.